So in this lesson, we are going to be comparing ratio tables. I can compare and analyze ratio tables so I can understand how to compare data and just how to compare data. And I know I've got it when I score 100% on the assignment following this lesson. Okay, so we're going to read through this introduction and then we're going to complete task 1. Several students are participating in a reading challenge at West Middle School. They earn points for the number of books they read, improving their reading speed, and for reading to younger students. As the grade levels increase, the point values change. Complete each of the following tasks by applying your understanding of ratios and ratio tables. So remember, we talked about ratios in our first lesson, and that's just a comparison of two quantities. And it's a multiplication comparison of the two quantities. And then ratio tables were ways to organize the ratios so that we can more easily analyze the information. Task 1, each grade is given a different number of points for each book read. So let's just take a look at how these tables are organized. So first of all, this one says, hey, this is our 6th graders. This is the information for our 7th graders, and this is the information for our 8th graders. So they've split the tables into 3 tables for grade levels. The first column in each of these is how many books they read. And then they gave points for those books that they read. But what it says up here is each grade level gave a different number of points for each book read. So what we can possibly figure out from this is some set ratios to decide how many points did 6th grade give for each book read, how many points did the 7th grades get for each book read, and how many points did the 8th graders get for each book read. So because they didn't all get the same point value for each book read, our data tables look very different from one another, and that might make it more challenging to try to figure out how to analyze it. It kind of makes it a little more confusing. So question A says analyze. What do you notice that is different about the ratio tables? So these tables show different numbers of books here. So we have 2, 5, 8, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6. So our book numbers are different. So it's really difficult to compare these tables. It makes it harder to compare. Our point levels we know are going to be different because they told us that up here. But if the book numbers were the same, we might have a little bit more information to be able to analyze the tables. Might be a little easier, but they're all different. So that makes it a little more challenging. Okay, question B says, how are the values in the books column displayed? So looking at our book for 6th grade, it starts at 2, it goes up by 3, it goes up by 3, it goes up by 3, it goes up by 3. So they did keep something consistent in their count. They went up by 3 every time they went up to the next count. So they jumped by 3 each time. When we look here, these books didn't start at the same amount, and they didn't jump by 3s like this table. They started at a different amount, and they jumped by 2s. And then when we analyze this column here, they start at 2 just like this one, but they don't go up by 3, they go up by 2. So they count by different amounts, and they have different starting values. So because of these differences, we got to find another way to try to analyze this data a little more easily. So what we're going to do is we are going to analyze the ratio, and we're going to analyze the ratio in a certain order. I'm going to select the order for us. We're going to analyze the ratio as points compared to books. Points to books. I'm going to start to number of books. So I'm going to start here putting a little code in for my ratios that I want to compare to help me analyze this data more easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at points to books, where I'm going to put points on top of my fraction as a ratio and books in the bottom. Okay, so the 6th grade, we'll start with the 6th grade. We can write the points for 6th grade right here is 68 points for reading 2 books. And then if we look at the next set of data, it's 170 points. I'm going to have to write small here. 170 points to reading 5 books. And then 272 points for reading 8 books. So these ratios are all actually equivalent ratios. They're all the same. And so because they had a set amount of points they gave for each book, it was a set amount that they earned. So if I reduce this fraction, if I reduce it right here, if I look at this, I can reduce that fraction, divide by 2 in the top and the bottom, because they have a common factor of 2. And what I find out, that scale factor is 2 here, is I end up at 34 points to 1 book. And if you reduce this fraction, scale it down by 5, you also get 34 to 1. And this one, scale down by 8, and you get 34 to 1. Okay, when we scale a fraction down out of 1, that is called a unit rate. A unit rate is when you have a denominator of 1. And it's a very helpful number when we're dealing and comparing tables like this. Okay, so the unit rate is 34 points. I'm going to put units on this for every 1 book read. That's the unit rate ratio. And so it's 34 to 1, 68 to 2, 170 to 5, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the 6th grade. So now I'm going to go on to the 7th grade. The 7th grade, it says 117 to 3. So again, points are on top, books are on the bottom, because I want to find the unit rate. I want to know how many points the 7th graders got every time they read 1 book. 117 to 3. Well, that's equivalent to 195 to 5. It's an equal ratio table because they told us that they got a set amount of points for each book. So now they're generating their data. 73 to 7. So all these are equivalent. If we scale this down, so we get a unit rate, that means we divide it by 3 to get that 1 in the bottom, or divide it by 5 to get a 1 in the bottom of that fraction. Any of these, when we scale them down to get that 1 in the bottom, we're creating that. Whoops, that should have been a 7. See, that doesn't make 1. If I divide 7 by 5, I need to divide 7 by 7. Any of these fractions scaled down to get that 1 in the denominator gives us our unit rate. I'll abbreviate that. UR, unit rate. And when we work that out, what we find is the 7th graders get 39 points per book. They get more points than the 6th graders every time they read a book. Okay, and now we're going to create some ratios from our table with the 8th grade to figure out what their unit rate is. So I'm looking at 72 to 2. They got 72 points for each 2 books out of 2 books read. Or if they read 4 books, they earned 144 points for 4 books. And a third fraction, I could use all of them. I'm just doing 3, 216 points for 6 books. Okay, and again, we scaled down to find the unit rate. A unit rate is when we have 1 book in the denominator. It's a very good number to know because it's going to make analyzing the table so much easier. So I'm just scaling down to a unit rate by dividing the top and bottom by that denominator. That creates a 1 in the bottom, 1 book. And how many points do they get every time they read a book? The 8th graders get 36 points every time they read a book. So they also got more than the 6th graders by 2 points. So this is a 1 and 34 for the unit rate, a 1 and a 39 for the unit rate, and a 1 and a 36. So now we can easily compare the points per book to one another without any question about which one, who gets the most, who gets the second most, and who gets the third. They get the most points every time they read a book. They came in second, and sixth grade gets the least number of points per book. Not sure why, but that's how it works. So when we're analyzing our data, we need to be making sure we look at our ratios with these tables, and we find that unit rate to make the comparisons easier, because again, the differences here, different number of books, are making it very difficult to compare, and that they're not all counting by the same amounts, and they have different starting values, which makes it very difficult to compare. So that's why we went to our unit rates down here. Okay, so 2 additional grade levels decide to participate, but their results were incomplete. Each grade level used a constant ratio. That means that all the data we're putting in this table has equivalent fractions in it. So there's a constant pattern to these ratios. Use the information given to complete the tables below. Which grade levels earn points the fastest? Justify your thinking. So just as a refresher, I have up top here that the 6th graders earn 34 points per book, 7th 39 points per book, 8th 36 points per book. So now we got 2 more grade levels that are competing. We'll see what kind of points they get for each book they read. So looking at the 5th grade, we have an incomplete table, but they did tell us that the table consists of a constant ratio. So looking at the table, do I have a ratio I can use to try to figure out that constant pattern they're using to develop this table? And I do. It's right here. They gave me two of the things we're comparing. Remember, we're comparing points to books, P to B. So we can take these 2 numbers and write that ratio, 168 points to 4 books. So there's the constant ratio. What I can do is I can find the unit rate, compute the unit rate, see what maybe that ratio is going to be. So that's one thing I could do. And what I would find is that a unit rate, again, means we have to have a 1 in that bottom fraction. We have to have a 1 here, and right now it's a 4. To get a 1, I have to divide 4 by itself. What you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And when we divide 168 by 4, we get 42. So for every book that those 5th graders read, they earn 42 points. Hey, they're beating out the 7th grade now. They are succeeded there. All right, so we have to figure out what these missing values are right here. In other words, we're going to have to scale some things up. If they earn 42 points for one book, we need to figure out how many points they're going to get for reading 3 books. We have to scale our 1 up to a 3. That means we got to multiply it by 3. Which means we got to do to the top to create that constant ratio or that consistent equivalent fraction, multiply 42 times 3, and we would get 126. So we're just going to fill that table in using our given ratio. The unit rate is super easy to use because it's very easy to see what to multiply by here. All right, so let's do this one because we know what the bottom number is for this one. So we're saying, hey, if it's 42 to 1, 42 points for every 1 book, and they read 10 books, how many points do they get? Well, to get from a 1 to a 10, we got to scale it up by 10. So we got to scale this one up by 10. And that's 420. If they read 10 books, they're going to earn 420 points. Remember, 42 for each book. Okay, now we're looking at the 294, and we're trying to figure out this number of books. So I know that I get 42 points for 1 book. And I know I've earned 294 points. And I want to know how many books that was. Well, how many times does 242 go into 294? 42 goes into 294 7 times. So I had to multiply 42 times 7 to build that up. The scale factor is 7, so I'm going to have to multiply 1 times 7 to get my new denominator to keep these fractions equivalent. So 7 books earns them 294 points. And now I filled out that table using the unit rate as one of my options there. So now let's take a look at the 9th graders. It looks like they earned 70 points after reading 2 books. We should be able to figure out, again, it's points to books. It's 70 to 2, 70 points for 2 books. And then we're going to find the unit rate, because that's a nice, easy fraction to scale up and scale down when it comes to these tables. We find it's 35 points for each book. So here's my number that my ratio that I'm going to use now to fill in the blanks for this one, and this one. So I have 35 to 1, and I'm working on this one right here. 35 for each book. If they read 5 books, then I'm scaling my points by 5 times, because that's 1 times 5 is 5. I got to match that on top. And 35 times 5 is 175. So if they read 5 books, they're going to earn 175 points. Okay, and then I'm going to start with my 35 to 1 again. And I need to find this missing value. So it's 35 to 1. And I've got to scale this at 380 up to 385 points. So I got to figure out how many times 35 goes into 385. And what I find is it goes in 11 times. So I have to multiply that by 11 to keep the fraction equivalent. So what I find is if they read 11 books, they'll earn 385 points. 11 times 35 is 385. And finally, 14. I have to do this one more time. 35 to 1, my unit rate, very key number. And I'm 14 books. Well, it's very easy to see what they scaled that up by, because 1 times 14 is 14. Now I got to multiply 35 times 14. And 35 times 14 is 490. So if you read 14 books, you're going to get 490 points if you're in the 9th grade. Okay, so which grade level earns the points the fastest? Well, it's going to be the 5th graders. 5th graders earn the points the fastest because they get the most points per book. They get the most points per book. They earn 42 points per book. And then next comes the 7th graders at 39 points per book. Then the 8th graders at 36 points per book. And then the 9th graders at 35 points per book. And then we got last. 6th grade is in last place at 34 points per book. Okay, so we have a new set of data here. They're going to earn points. Task 3 says students in each grade level earn points for the number of minutes they spend reading aloud to younger students. Use the table below to answer the questions. So again, we have 3 grade levels, 6th, 7th, and 8th. They've divided the data out. And we have the number of minutes for our 6th graders and how many points they earned for reading to students for those minutes. Here's the 7th grade minutes and their points, and here's the 8th grade minutes and their points for reading. Determine the ratio of number of minutes read to number of points earned. Number of minutes read, they're giving us the order they would like us to do the ratio in, to number of points earned. So we're doing this for each grade level. So we're going to first take a look at 6th grade. And when we look at the fraction of the number of minutes read to the number of points earned, we see it's 10 to 2, 20 to 4, 30 to 6, and 40 to 8. There's a consistent pattern to this. I'm just going to use the colon right here to represent the ratio rate in the table. And you can do the same. Now, when we look at these ratios, they are not in lowest terms. This one in lowest terms, 10 to 2, would simplify as 5 to 1. 20 to 4 is also 5 to 1. 30 to 6 is 5 to 1. 40 to 8 is 5 to 1. So there's that consistent. So for 6th grade, the ratio is that every 5 minutes that goes by and they're reading, they get 1 point. So I wrote that in fraction form. So let's take a look at this right here. 7th grade, it's 15 to 3, 45 to 9, 75 to 15, and 105 to 21. These are also not in lowest terms. They don't match these numbers at all. They're not the same. They're, doesn't look like they're easy to compare. But when we do this, we realize if we reduce 5 to 3 or 15 to 3, it comes out 5 to 1. 45 to 9 is also a 5 to 1 ratio. And 75 to 15 is a 5 to 1 ratio. And then 105 to 21 is a 5 to 1 ratio. So they have the same number of points that they're earning. 7th grade is also earning 5. Every 5 minutes, they're earning a point. Okay, so the 8th grade, when we're looking at that ratio, so 7th and 6th have the same. The 8th grade, 25 to 5. Well, that reduces 5 to 1. 50 to 10 reduces 5 to 1. 75 to 15 also reduces 5 to 1. If we write it as fraction, put it into lowest terms, we're getting a 5 to 1. 100 to 20, 5 to 1. So these also have a 5 minute. Every 5 minutes they spend reading to the kids, they get a point. So using that, reducing your fractions down into simplest form makes this comparison very easy when you do that. So, and it gives us our unit rates in these cases. When we're reducing, we're getting that unit rate, that one in the bottom. All right, so easy to compare. The process of answering this question above was simply putting ratios into lowest terms, created a unit rate of 5 to 1 for all grade levels. Which means they all had the same point values when they did this reading piece to the younger students. So it made it easy to compare them. They were all the same. Not like the previous problem. And they have a table that's supposed to demonstrate or display information about number of books and how many months they were reading for. And we can see in the table that when Edgar read for 13 months, it totaled 78 books right here. So let's put some labels in. If Edgar has 13 in this column, that must be the number of books he's read. So let's just title that books. Important to know what column is what. And that makes 78 the number of, oh, I said that backwards, sorry. There were 13 months that he read for, and in that 13 months time, he read 78 books. So months is in this column, and books goes in this column. That's how they organize the data. Okay, so now we got to fill in what's missing. So we're going to start with this right here, and we're going to look up here at this. We want to know how many books he read in a month. So I am going to set up books on top and months on the bottom, and it's 78 to 13 was the ratio they gave us. And they're using this ratio to make equivalent ratios throughout this table. We just have to figure out what they are. Well, we have months in the bottom, so I want to know how many books in 1 month. If we do a pattern of 78 to 13, how many books in 1 month? Well, to get from a 13, scale it down to a 1, we need to divide 13 by 13. To get from 78 to how many books he read in that time period, we need to divide by 13. We need to scale both of them down. And 13 goes into 78 6 times. So his rate, his unit rate, remember when we have a 1 in the bottom, that's the unit rate. His unit rate is 6 books each month that passes. So 6 books in a month. Okay, now let's just, without having to make all these ratios, let's see if we can complete these numbers without having to write a bunch of stuff down and scale up and scale down to create these equivalent fractions, because we've done a few of them. We should start seeing these patterns right with our table, because that's the point of the table. Be able to see patterns and not have to do all this extra work. Well, we scaled this up here from 6 to 24. To scale it up, we need to multiply by 4. Now we need to scale that up by the same amount. So we're going to multiply that by 4. So now we have to look at the next one. I'm always going to go back if I have the unit rate and use the unit rate because it's the easiest way to see what to do a lot of the time. So if we go from a 6 to a 42, you should recognize with your basic fact knowledge that that's scaling it up 7 times bigger. So now we're going to multiply 1 times 7. What's easier than that? 7. Okay. So now we have that ratio. 42 to 7 is the same as 6 to 1. Okay, and now we're going to look at this next one. And we've got a 6 to we don't know what. But we know we scaled the 1 up 10 times bigger. So since we went up 10 times on this ratio, we got to go up 10 times on this ratio. And we get 10 times 6 is 60. And we've completed that table without actually having to write all our ratios down, just using our table and our basic fact knowledge to try to scale those up. Okay, looking at this scenario, we know that in 6 minutes, Jocelyn can read 15 pages. So this is a little different scenario. Looking at our columns, I can see that she has 6 minutes. So this is the minutes. I'm going to abbreviate minutes. And she reads 15 pages. So I'm going to put pages into that column. So I'm going to start, we don't have a unit rate for this because we don't have that 1 in the bottom. If we're going to do pages compared to minutes, we know it's a 15 to 6 ratio. So looking here, this one's already filled out, so I don't need to fill that one in. This is missing both. We're going to come back and do that last. So we're going to take a look at 15 to 60. If I scale 15 up to 60, I would have had to multiply 15 times 4. And I get 24. Some of you can do that right in the chart without actually having to write this down, which is awesome. So times by 4, we're going to need to times this by 4. And that's going to be 24. So I've scaled this up. And I scale that up by the same amount. Now I'm looking at this next one that says 15, and I'm scaling to 75. Well, I know 15 times 5. 6 times 5 is 30. So I'm going to do that without writing the fraction down, because multiplying by 5 is not too bad. Okay, now we got to figure this out. Well, for this one, we're just going to notice the pattern in the table, that this is going up from 15 to 45, 45 to 60, it went up by 15. It went up 30 here, 15, 15. So I see this pattern of we're trying to go up by 15 every step. And on this side, I went up 12 and then 6 and 6. So really the stair steps for this is every time on this side, I'm going up by 15. So this is going to be a 30 using that pattern. And this one right here is going to be a 12 because those are missing as far as the order looking down our table. So there you have it. Got that one filled out. Okay, in this next scenario, Wu reads 25 mysteries for every 20 science fiction books. So right here we have the 25 and the 20. So we need to figure out what these labels are. 25 mysteries. So this is the number of mysteries. I'm going to abbreviate mysteries. For every 20 science fiction, sci-fi books. So they're the genre that they're reading. Those are the two categories. Okay, so we're looking at this, and I know it's 25 to 20, so I might want to put, hey, let's write the ratio here. I'm going to write the ratio of mysteries to sci-fi, and I'll just code it with some letters, and then I'm going to put the numbers in, 25 to 20. And I want to see if I can figure out what to do with these. So looking at this, I might want to put this in lowest terms. That might be an easier route to go in. So if I put this in lowest terms, I'm going to get 5 to 4 because I can divide 5 out of both those. So sci-fi 4, that becomes a 5. So I've got it in lowest terms and I can build from that. So if I went up here from a 4 to an 8, I doubled. So I need to double my 5 for the other number. Double it. Okay, to go from a 4 to a 12, I tripled, and I tripled. They matched. The scale factor was a 3. To go up from a 4 to, oh, what's missing here? 4, 8, 12, oh, 16. I got a skippy count. 5, 10, 15, oh, 20's missing. There you go. Table done. Okay, our final example. The library shelves contain 28 nonfiction for every 80 fiction. Well, I'm going to look for 28 and 80 in my table. It's right there. They're giving me a ratio, a pattern to use for the entire table. So I have that this 28 is the nonfiction. Nonfiction. That means true story. Okay, and then this one is the fake made-up stories, fiction. And I'm abbreviating. Okay, so I got my columns labeled so I can keep the numbers straight. And I know it's 28 to 80, or I'll put nonfiction over fiction. We'll help you get started on this. And once we get started on this, I want you to complete it and then check with the video when you're done to see if you've got it. So nonfiction, it was 28 to 80. Well, I do highly recommend you try to put that in lowest terms. The GCF of a 28 and an 80 is a 4. 28 divided by 4 is 7. 80 divided by 4 is 20. So for every 7 nonfiction books, they read 20 fiction books. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to fill out these 3 boxes using the ratio we just came up with, more than likely the one you're going to tap into to use, to figure out what numbers go with those to keep this ratio constant in this table. Then turn the video back on to see if you got it. Okay, the first missing value was 14. To get from a 20 to a 40, you doubled. You scaled it up by 2, so we have to scale 7 by 2. We get 14. To get from a 20 to a 60, we tripled. So we have to triple the 7 on this side to get 21. Okay, and then this one was already done. 20 times 4, 7 times 4, and then 20 times 5 is 100. Because we went 7 times 5 to get to 35, we need to scale that up. And there you have it. That it completes those tables. So now you should be ready to begin your worksheet or assignment on comparing ratio tables. Good luck.